Good day everyone. Today we are going to discuss about the interpretation of assessment results. And here's our intended learning outcomes. And if you want to read it, you can pause the video and take time to read our intended learning outcomes. But before we start, I have here an activity and you're going to answer it and write your answer in the 1/4 sheet of paper. Just pause the video and answer the statements. So, what is interpretation of assessment results? Interpretation of assessment results involves analyzing and drawing meaningful conclusions from student performance data to make informed decisions about teaching, learning, and educational policy. Interpretation of assessment results means looking at a student's test scores and performance data to understand what they know and what they need to help with. This helps teachers and school leaders make better decisions about how to teach, how students learn, and how to improve education policies. In short, it's about using test results to make smart choices in teaching and learning. And we have here the purpose and benefits of interpretation of assessment results. Under purpose, we have measure and evaluate students' learning and achievement, identify learning gaps and areas for improvement, guide instructional planning and differentiation, monitor students' progress over time, communicate performance to stakeholders, students, the parents and administrators. And under the benefits, we have support data-driven instruction and intervention, increases accountability and transparency in education, promote equity by identifying underserved learners, and encourage reflective teaching and continuous improvement. To sum that up, the purpose and benefit of interpretation assessment result is that it is essential for understanding how well the students or the program meet the learning objectives. It informs decision making to improve teaching, the learning, and curriculum alignment. Accurate interpretation helps identify the strength, the instructional gaps, and areas needing for improvement. It also enable us to target the intervention and program enhancement, and sharing the result to foster collaborative discussion among educators, leading to curriculum revision, better advising, and enhance the academic service. So now that we understand what is the interpretation of assessment result and its purpose, its benefit, let's take a closer look at the different types of score we get from these assessments. Knowing the types of score help us better understand the student performance and make more accurate interpretation in their performance. So the first type of score is the raw score. It is simply the number of points received on a test when the student has been scored according to the direction. So the raw score is the original or ito yung unaltered score obtained by a student or a test taker on an assessment. So it represents the number of correct answer or points earned without any transformation or statistical manipulation. So the raw score is used during the initial scoring to get an adjusted measure of performance. It's the first step before converting into more interpretation forms like the percentiles or the scaled scores. So the raw score is used at the starting point in scoring and assessment because they directly reflect the individual's performance on a test or evaluation, and the raw scores serve as the basis for further analysis, such as converting into scaled scores, percentiles, and the standard scores to provide more meaningful interpretation. In classroom and research settings, the raw score helps identify strengths and weaknesses and guides the instructional decisions in that area. And here's the example for raw score. In a grade 6 science test with 50 items, if a student answered 35 correctly, the raw score of that student is 35. 35 is the raw score because as we defined earlier, the raw score is the number of correct answer of a student, or the points earned without any transformation or statistical manipulation, right? So that 35 is the raw score of the student. And here's the limitation of raw score. Number 1 is it doesn't account for test difficulty, can't be compared across tests or population, and lack context. For example, a 35 might be good or bad depending on the class performance. So the raw score can be misleading because they don't show how hard the test was, and it is not meant for comparing across different groups because hindi ito nag-undergo sa statistical manipulation, and also it hindi sinasabi kung dito kung paano pinagdag-iba yung performance ng mga students. The next type of score is the percentile score. A percentile score indicates the percentage of a score below a specific score in a distribution. So this percentile score is an individual raw score that converted into a number indicating the percent of people in the reference group who scored below the test taker. So the use of percentile score is in the norm reference assessment. It is to understand a student's relative standing compared to others. The norm reference assessment scores are compared to the performance of a group called the norm group. So rather than just evaluating how much content does a student mastered, we say that the use in norm reference assessment to understand a student's relative standing compared to others. We mean that the student's score is used to see how they did compared to their peers or to their fellow students. So it doesn't just show what they know, but it shows how well they perform in relation to others who took the same test.
I have here an example for percentile score. Anna took a math test with a 100 student in her class. After the test, the teacher told Anna that her score was at the 85th percentile. So Anna, who scored in the 85th percentile, means she outperformed 85% of her class peers or her classmates. And we have here the limitations for percentile score. Number 1 is it does not reflect actual performance, because percentile score only tells you how you rank compared to others, not what you actually knew or did on the test. So you could score low, have a high percentile if the test was hard for everyone, or vice versa. For example, you might get 60% of question right, but if most people get less than that, you could be in the 90th percentile. This means you outperform others, but it doesn't say whether you master the content. And the second one is easily misunderstood as percentage score. So people often confuse a percentile score with a percentage score, but they are not the same. An 85th percentile means you did better than 85% of people. It does not mean you got 85% of the answer right. So, for example, a person could be in the 85th percentile with a score of 65 depending on how other perform. And for the last type of test score for my discussion, we have here the standard score. So the standard score is a transform raw score into a scale with a mean and standard deviation, often a z-score or a t-score. So the standard score is a transform version of raw score. It shows how far it is from the average or from the mean in terms of standard deviations. It convert your raw score into a scale based on the mean and the standard deviation. And as you can see in the screen, we have the known average as the mean and the known spread as the standard deviation. And we have also the two common types of standard score, which is going to be discussed deeper by your next teacher. The z-score is equals to mean is equals to 0, while the standard deviation is 1, while in t-score, when the mean is 50, the standard deviation is equals to 10. So we can use the standard score to determine how far a score is from the average, helping compare scores from the different norms. This means that the score tells us if someone did better or worse than most people, and by how much. So, and also, this is measured in standard deviation, and that standard deviation is a number that shows how spread out scores are in a group. And here's the example for standard score. If the test manual indicates that the average or mean score for the group on a test is 50, then an individual who gets higher score is above average and the individual who got a lower score is below the average. So we have here the limitations for standard deviation. The first one is it requires statistical understanding. So the standard score use concepts like mean, standard deviation, and z-score. And to fully understand them, you need a basic grasp of statistics. For example, saying a z-score of positive 1.5 means 1.5 in standard deviation above the mean. So it is confusing if someone doesn't know what a standard deviation is. So without the knowledge, people might not understand how good or bad the score really is. The second limitation for standard scores is misleading if distribution is not normal. So the standard scores assume that the test score follow a normal or the bell curve distribution, wherein most of the students are around average and fewer are very high or very low. So if the test scores or the test results are skewed or not the bell shape, the standard score can give a false impression of performance. And also, if a test is too easy and most of students get high scores, the distribution is skewed to the left. A student might get a z-score of 0 or the average, but in reality, almost everyone did well, so being average might not mean so much. So we have here the comparison table. And in the raw score, it shows the actual point scored. Diba? It's the number of correct answer in the test. And in the percentile score, it is the percent of people you outperform. For example, you are in the 85th percentile. That means that you are above the 85% of your peers, or 85% of your fellow students. And we have here the standard score, which is the distance from the mean in standard deviation units. And the type of measurement is under the raw score, we have the ratio. In percentile score, we have the ordinal. And the standard score, we have the interval. And based on other scores, the raw score is not based on other scores. The percentile score is yes, it is based on other scores. And the standard deviation is based on the other score. Like you compare it to the other score of your fellow students or peers. So the raw score is easy to understand. The percentile score is fairly, while the standard score is it needs some explanation to understand. We have here the example the raw score is 42 over 50. That 42 is the raw score, or the correct answer for the test, while the percentile score is 85th percentile. We have the standard score that Z is equals to positive 1.5. So before we end, I have here an activity, and the direction is match the scenario in column A to the type of score in column B. Response may be used once, more than one, or not at all. Write it in a 1/4 sheet of paper and ready to justify your answer in the classroom. And that's all for my discussion, everyone. Thank you for having time watching my video.